There is a quote that says, "Sometimes the greatest adventures are the ones you never expected." For my guest today, Will Meara, he takes satisfaction in finding those places that may be hard to get to, and in a lot of cases are not high on someone's list as a place they would want to visit. Will finds plenty of adventures in places you would not expect. Get ready to head somewhere your mother doesn't want you to go with my guest, Will Meara. Welcome to Journey with Jake. This is a podcast about adventure and how through our adventures we can overcome the challenges of life that come our way. While I expect you will learn some things about different adventures, this show will entertain you. Each episode will feature a different guest or guests as they share experiences and stories from the different adventures they have been on. Not only will you be entertained, but you will also hear the failures and trials each guest faces and what they have done or are doing to overcome the hardships that come their way. My goal is to take each of us on a journey through the experiences of my guests with the hope that you'll be entertained and inspired to overcome your day-to-day challenges. After all, it's not all about the destination as it is about the journey. Welcome back to another episode. My name is Jake Bushman, and I have the pleasure of hosting Journey with Jake, which is all about our adventures and our personal journeys. I'm excited to have Will Meara on the show with me today. Will is all about adventure and is the owner of Ready for Road Adventures, which is all about providing group trips to places that are not super common or easy to get to, like Pakistan and Afghanistan. Before we get to my conversation with Will, just a couple of housekeeping items. First, check me out on Instagram at Journey with Jake Podcast. This is the best place to get to know my guests with some daily reels and snippets from the shows, as well as some personal insights from yours truly as well. I am also on YouTube, so if you prefer to watch episodes, you can do that as well. You can find me on YouTube at Journey with Jake Podcast, and I will leave a link in the description. Have you ever had the chance to ride in a rickshaw? Okay, maybe not just ride in one, but take one across the entire country of Pakistan. I don't think a lot of people have done that, but my guest, Will Meara, has, and you are going to love his story. If you like this, you will also enjoy episode 103 with Scott Gurian about the Mongol Rally and his adventures from Europe to Mongolia. Okay, get ready for some fun with my guest, Will Meara. Well, I'm excited today. I have someone who is really adventurous, likes to get out of his comfort zone a lot, does a lot of fun things. I've got Will Meara on the show with me today. Will, welcome to Journey with Jake.
What's going on, Jake? It's good to be here. Nice to chat to you. You're a fun guy.
Thank you. Appreciate that. It's fun to chat with you as well. Looking through your Instagram, looking at what you do. You take a lot of tours and things. You take people on tours to some exotic places that I really want to, talk about. Some of these places are, I think you use the phrase places that your mothers don't necessarily want you to go or something along those lines. So I'm excited to talk to you about that. Before we dive into all that, if you don't mind, give us a little background on who you are, where you're from, all that good stuff, if you don't mind.
Sure. So my name's William Meara, and I'm from Dublin in Ireland. And I split myself into two people. On the one hand, I'm a chief commercial officer of my own entertainment enterprise that does 500,000 tickets a year for a bingo rave concept that spans 200 locations across the world. And on the other side, you'll oftentimes find me riding across an iron ore train in Sahara, riding a rickshaw the length of Pakistan, or sometimes ending up in places that your mother, like you said, wouldn't want you to go to, which has also ended up, me leading tourists to some of these places because people are kind of afraid to go alone. I guess if I was to boil it down into a sentence, I'm an event organizer and I'm an adventure travel.
You're all over the place, it sounds like. And I know you're kind of spanning all over the place. You're located in Dublin, right? You're Irish, you're Dublin.
Yeah, I'm from Dublin in Ireland, currently here. Got to take care of my dad's health. But actually, I've been living in the United States for the last 6 months where we've been expanding some commercial operations, which was a stark contrast, the lifestyle of on the fringe of Europe, the island at the corner of the world here versus the biggest metropolitan metroplex that is New York City. So I'm glad to be home, but I'm very glad that I went.
Good. Very good. Good background then for you. I like it. Getting to this whole, these ideas of going to places, doing things that are just out of the ordinary. Did you kind of grow up being adventurous as a kid? Is Is it something that your parents instilled in you? How did you get this, idea to like, hey, I want to be adventurous and get out and do things out of my comfort zone?
When I was a kid, I was a bit of a scaredy cat. I remember asking my parents, when I would touch something, is that going to kill me? I was a germaphobe, fear of everything, couldn't even sleep with the door, closed or with the lights off. But something happened about maybe 13, 14 years ago, and my mum passed away. She kind of grew up in 1960s Catholic Ireland, which was very much so. The state was sort of influenced a lot by the Catholic Church, and there was a lot of very gruesome stuff happening. And when I say gruesome stuff, there was a lot of child abuse in the church. There was a lot of these kind of Magdalene laundries, which are masquerading as slave labor for the church. Very dark history. If you look at the Magdalene laundries in Ireland, you'll see what I mean. But it was repressive, and her mother was abusive, her stepfather was abusive. So she had a hard life, and I empathized with her a lot, and I was very close with my mum. But she passed away because she spent most of her life taking prescription medicines and abusing alcohol, sadly. And so, due to her depression and her fondness of the nectar in the bottle, she never really got to explore the world. She lived a very sort of hermit-like experience, stayed at home most days, blinds closed, and that's a tough thing to watch growing up. But at any sort of sign of me spreading my wings, she would be the number one ambassador. She would champion any sort of little trip I would do, anytime I would, try a new sport. She was very happy to see me do all the things that she couldn't do. And so when she passed, it was a very deep sense of grieving for a couple of years, and I distracted myself terribly. When I say I distracted myself, I mean I worked 17 hours a day on my phone, laptops, and tablets. Started 2 or 3 different companies, had another job, a few little side hustles going on, and I realized that I was sort of just distracting myself. I was keeping myself busy so I didn't have to feel. I could just keep doing things. As long as I was doing things, I wasn't thinking a whole lot of stuff, and that made it easier. But I realized that I was really burning out. So at that time, I left my relationship, I left my job, I closed down one of the companies I was working on. I kept one sort of going, just sort of couldn't let it go. It was like a tech addiction consultancy, and we were giving TEDx talks in Delhi and India and all sorts of stuff. So it just seemed fun with very little work. And so I decided just to pack a bag, and I booked a one-way flight to India. This was super intimidating for me because I hadn't really traveled a huge amount. I'd maybe been to Thailand once, Spain once, but nowhere as crazy as the cacophony of India. And the immersion in the sights, the sounds, the smells, the visuals, this sort of like overzealous and super interested people who were like, who's this guy walking down this little alley here in the city center of Delhi? That was the moment where I realized I was extraordinarily uncomfortable. I sort of ran back to my hotel room. I locked myself in there, and I was like, did I make the right decision? What am I doing? I'd had people following me, people trying to sell me stuff. I'd been scammed by a tour. Like everything you can think could happen to you within the first 2 or 3 hours, it happened. And I was like, this is, in all essence of the word, just kind of shit. so but I sat there and I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter what happens to me. I can imagine my mom will be laughing at me. And so it sort of became sort of like a penchant in my mind to constantly push myself to do outlandish things, ridiculous things, because the story, if I had the chance to retell it to her, would be something that she'd be terrified of. She'd slap you around the back of the hand, but she'd be like, "Do you know what? It's hilarious," because she had that sort of personality where, like, if she lost you as a kid, she'd smack you around the back of the head. Then it would come from a place of love, She'd glad she found you again, and so that sort of triggered a sequence of events over the course of the next sort of 10 years, where gallivanted to maybe over 110, 112 countries. I haven't really counted in a while, but approaching it in a way that wasn't ticking off the top 10 things on TripAdvisor. It wasn't about, finding the most rated restaurants in Google, seeing famous landmarks that are highlighted on a map. It was more about getting in and under the skin of what's happening on a social level. And to understand that, sometimes you need to know what's going on a political level. And that's brought me to refugee camps and war zones and stuff that I never planned on doing. But the more you get to know people, the more you ask them, the more you interrogate them as you kind of amble from day to day, the more you get drawn into a side of the world that is different from the one you had the perception of. And so, from the confines and the secure sanctuary of our homes, behind our, black mirrors in our hands, we get a perception of the world. We think it's about, what's being presented to us through either virality or a mainstream projection. So for the US, it's what's CNN, CNBC, what's Fox News showing you. Or if you're not getting that, you're seeing some 17-year-old TikToker who's gone on a Twitter wormhole presenting something to you. Maybe you find something that way. But ultimately, algorithms give you polarized information also. So there's no way to get unpolarized information unless you go and just go see it yourself. And this was the realization. It was when I was visiting certain countries, say Pakistan, Iran, Iraq, for example. I had people who were like, "Do you need to have kidnapping insurance? Do you what's the chance of getting beheaded? Do you need personnel, military, with you at all times?" And more often than not, my response was, "No, I'm staying in the house of a local dude I met on couch surfing or I met on a meetup, and the hospitality is being great and they won't accept my money." And it's the polar opposite to what we've been led to believe our whole life, that these are people who have a penchant for pain for us. The
Yeah.
most bizarre thing. So when you think of a country like Iran, immediately you think of like an Ayatollah, theocratic ruling regime that is oppressive. And yeah, look, the citizens there have a tough time keeping in line with this regime. Every country is a regime. The word regime has a bad connotation to it. We all have to pay taxes. That's a regime, or subservient to something. But there, it's more of a theocratic nature. But what I found was, and just using Iran as an arbitrary example, yes, on the surface level, they play up with this thing, but behind closed doors, it was whiskey, techno, cool parties. Everyone was super friendly, and honestly, you could be in an apartment in New York having a party after hours. Behind closed doors, exactly the same as all of us. This blew my mind. Blew my mind. Not to mention that the women were absolutely stunning also. So learning over the course of a few years that these places that were usually condoned to, I guess they were just trashed by the media,
Right.
terrorist hotspots, war-torn hellholes. These are animalistic, primitive people. Look what they're doing. Actually, there was amazing hospitality, an ancient food culture that goes back thousands of years, some archaeological wonders that are UNESCO World Sites that honestly would blow you, and you still wonder how they were made with the technology back in the day. And it's the most welcoming people. And some of the most amazing landscapes as well. I was blown away. In Pakistan, they have this region called Gilgit-Baltistan. It has the highest concentration of high altitude peaks in the world, the most glaciers, the longest glaciers, and it also has the highest paved motorway. So I was like, hold on, if this is like a record breaking place, I've never heard of it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's just it. I haven't heard of that. It's interesting though. You mentioned Iran. You just gave that as kind of an arbitrary example. You're the third person I've had recently who's talked about the hospitality of those people and how great they are.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. We sit here behind our screens and things like, "Ooh, Iran, it's scary. It's, you don't want to mess with that." And the people behind, like you said, behind closed doors, the people are loving and caring and kind. And, I love that. I love the fact that you're out there exploring that.
The way to compare it to an American audience is if you look at the international policies of a government, where they might, have military aggression or interfere in international politics or whatever it is, and then you go, right, what's Joe who lives in Austin doing on a Thursday? What does he think? What does he care about? And Joe's
Right.
probably a super nice guy, doesn't even know where any of the countries that the US are even, have a military frontier. He's just living his life, having a great time. Probably the nicest guy. He'd have a few beers in the bar, get some barbecue. Simple. And
Exactly.
it's the same for, most people in Iran as well. Like they might not agree with what the government's doing.
Hmm.
They have no real choice with what the government's doing, but they have a really ancient culture, like the birthplace of Zoroastrianism, and it's still practiced there for some parts. It's like a religion of the flame, and they never let the flame go out. Pretty fascinating if you had a chance to look into it. But they also have, there's two prongs to Iranian hospitality. They have the classic Middle Eastern hospitality, which is they'll give you the shirt off their back. But they also have this other system, and anyone who's Iranian or is familiar with Iran and listening to this will go, I know what he's talking about. It's called taruf. Taruf is a system where you offer something without the intention of really offering it, you know? So it's you're offering it to be nice, but you're doing it in the way that it's just a pleasantry. If someone goes, hey, Jake, that is a really nice car you got, you'll go, oh, hey, take it, take the keys. And I know that's an unreasonable thing. You're not
Yeah.
going to give me your car, but I'll go, no, no, brother, no, no, it's okay. And you'll go, no, please, you must take the car. And I'm like, no, no, really, I have to refuse you almost like 3 times, and then I'll know that the offer genuinely was just tariff. If after 3 times you're still insisting, now I'm in a position to actually accept it. And this is
Wow.
a confusing thing because, when I was in Iran, I'd be like walking down the street and someone would say, where are you staying? As I haven't booked anywhere yet. And they're like, please come stay with me. And for the first few days, I was like, yeah, sure. So I was staying in loads of random people's houses. Only after 3 or 4 days did someone tell me about this tariff system. And I was like, oh, maybe these people weren't genuine. So it's really hard because you're not sure if it's like Middle Eastern hospitality, which is amazing, or it's just an ingenuine tariff to like seem nice. But we saw it a few times where like I was admiring some guy's watch and he took it off and he threw it at me and he was like, that's your watch. And I was like, oh, I know, I've seen this before. So it's a funny one. But yeah, for the most part, like I would say the most hospitable countries I've traveled to, number one is Pakistan. Number two is Bangladesh. And number three is Iran. Number four is India, but they've had a lot of tourism over the years, spiritual tourism, and it's for all the good hospitality they have. You're also getting a lot of scams. That's
Sure.
that, that's hard
Kind of
work.
weighs it out. Let's
Yeah,
go. Let's go back to that trip you made to India. That first trip, you kind of went solo, and you're like, "All right,
yeah.
I'm gonna book a one-way trip. I'm gonna go to India." And you said those first few hours, you got scammed, and you were uncomfortable, and you went back to your hotel room. When you're in that moment of feeling that uncomfortable feeling, how do you rise above that to move on and think that, this is going to be a great experience? Because when you look back, it's like, okay, cool. But when you're in the middle of it, it's tough. How do you overcome that when you're in the middle of it?
I think comfort. How to put it? It's like your ability to overcome difficult shit. Right, gets better the more you practice it. It's like a muscle. If you don't use it, it gets worse. And so it's like, imagine like it's January, you've eaten loads of turkey and tons of beers in December, and you go to the gym in January and everyone's in there. Everyone's smashing it out of it, doing the weights, doing the cardio, hitting it up. After maybe 6 weeks, you go to the gym, maybe mid-February, and people they're going every third day. Now they're going every fifth day. And by April, maybe they stop going because they've stopped exercising that, okay, it doesn't get any easier. It's still hard to step outside of your comfort zone every single time. It's not as if it gets easier. You can build habit with something, but it's not as if it gets easier. So this first culture shock for me it was exactly that. It was a shock. But once I found my feet, I figured out a couple of words, what apps I should use, what I should avoid, how to get a bus, how to get a rickshaw, whatever it may be. Those little things, gradually, it just felt normal. So after a month in India, I was navigating it no problem, negotiating what I needed to negotiate, checking the rooms before I confirmed I was taking a room to make sure it actually was as advertised, and just small little things you picked up along the way, making sure you count all the change when you get it back from the shopkeeper. And then I realized that, like, okay, so you can, like, it's like stepping into hot water, scalding at first, but after a while you settle. But the fear of it is what stops people doing it. So a lot of people are very happy going on holidays to Las Vegas, going to Orlando, to resorts, all the comfortable things. That's amazing. It's great for relaxation, letting your hair down, blasting a few dollars and having a good time. What you're not going to get is character forming traits. You're not going to mentally fortify what you're able to do with your mind. And also, you're not going to learn anything new. There's no development in that. There's no like interface that doesn't fit, that you have to figure out how to make it work. So I sort of got a little bit addicted to this, and I was like, well, how far can I push it? And for the most part, between staying more with locals, planning less before going somewhere, like people plan for months before visiting a country, just planning on the hop. And in that one little trip, and I kind of have been traveling pretty much on and off for the last 10 years, I went from India to Nepal, trekked all around the Himalayas with no trekking gear for 14 days in the middle of winter. Stupidest idea. Should have planned, still survived. It was totally fun. Great experience. My feet are still damaged from it. After that, I went back to visit Ireland for a little bit, popped off to Bali, went to the Philippines, went to Australia, went to China, just kept popping to country because I was like, what's near? Where can I book a flight that's just the next place and just keep this train going? And after a while, you start to feel like nothing's impossible. If an opportunity comes, does it sound like a good story? Is it going to be something that I'm going to learn from? Is it going to break the bank? And if not, that's great. And that was the mantra. If it doesn't break you, just go and give it a go, because you've nothing to lose by failing. But the idea was that every day you would do something that would challenge you, whether it was learning how to say 10 phrases in Mandarin to get around, or, trying to attempt hitchhiking in deep China. You just gave it a go. Was it going to work?
I like
don't know.
that.
Learn something.
I like that. You said nothing to lose by failing, but think of everything that you have to gain. And I can
like
tell you've gained a lot.
Memes, those entrepreneurship memes you see, like, nothing to lose, only everything to gain. And it's easy, but it's so true. You're not going to gain anything from feet up on the edge of the couch scrolling away on Instagram or TikTok, except maybe like a quick cooking hack.
Right.
So ultimately, yeah, like the best thing to do is go out there and do something you think you can't. And if you try it enough, eventually you will. You're never too late or too old to learn something.
I love it. Let's talk about a place that I know has special meaning to you. And you said for you, it's the number one hospitality place, Pakistan. What is it about Pakistan? Why do you love Pakistan so much?
I guess it was the first country, quote unquote, that I thought was dangerous. And I was in Myanmar, or Burma, everyone calls it something, I guess, at the time. And I had done a 10-day Vipassana silent meditation retreat in this sort of, I want to say it's like a Dhamma center. Let's call it ashram, temple, whatever it is. And it was like no reading, no writing, no talking, no nothing. Now I had a big bottle of gin in my bag because I'm also a bit of a lunatic. And you're not meant to have any alcohol. You're not meant to like talk to women, nothing like that. And so you're going in to just sit down in silence for 10 days and just, that's it. You focus on this body scanning meditation. And I'd shared a room with this guy from Finland. He's now one of my best mates. And we weren't allowed to talk to each other, make eye contact. So imagine we're sharing like a room with two single beds, very, very minimalist accommodation, like a wooden bed with a net. That's it. The pillow's harder than the bed. After 10 days, I sort of felt like I knew this guy. I felt like we had gone through a million journeys in silence together, navigating around each other in this room, trying not to look at each other and stuff. Really kind of funny, actually. And on the last day, when we broke our noble silence and our voices were cackling back to normality, and we were allowed to talk again, I asked him, who he was. And we got on like a house on fire. And I asked him, like, well, where are you going next? And he told me, and he asked me, where are you going next? I said, I think I'm going to go back to India. There's some weird stuff I want to try. And I was explaining it to him, and he was like, if you're that kind of guy, why don't you go one step further and go to Pakistan? It's only next door. And as far as I'm concerned, it's the most friendly country in the world. And I was like, no, you can't go to Pakistan. That's like super dangerous. Now you get kidnapped or you get blown up or something. No, and he started laughing. He's like, your biggest fear is getting overfed and getting fat, because they will feed you until you're full and you'll be pretty much like sequestered and taken around to do stuff. Like they won't let you go. Once you like meet someone and they say, do you want to come to my house? You're theirs for 2 or 3 days. And it's an honor for them to have a guest, especially an international guest. Because the measure of someone in Pakistan is, someone says, wow, look, Jake has lots of guests. People must really like Jake. He must be a really good person. So your character is measured by how liked you are by the peers around you. Whereas in the US, or I would say even in Ireland, it's how much money do you make? How successful are you? You know, like
Right.
you wear nice clothes, got a nice car and a big house. Oh, he's a good guy, you know. Should date that man, you know. But not in Pakistan. I mean, a little bit, but not the same way. So I was blown away by this. I was like, wow, really? I kind of want to go, you know. I don't really know much about it. It was really just something I'd blanked out. But getting a visa, you needed to return to your home country and apply in person at the consulate. This was going to be a problem. I was on the other side of the world, and I wasn't going to go all the way back to Ireland, back again on a budget like that. This is a few years ago. I wasn't really making a lot of money at the time. I was really living on savings, traveling around. And so he said, "Yeah, like I traveled in by land. I came in from Iran at the land border back in the day, and maybe it's changed now. But this guy had hitchhiked from Finland, so he'd gone the whole way through Europe, all the way through the
Wow.
Middle East, and like crossed into Pakistan. You know, it's a really interesting guy. Anyway, I was determined now to make it work. So I put up on Facebook at the time, hey, I'm trying to go to Pakistan. And apparently the only way I can get in is getting a business visa on arrival in Lahore Airport. It's one of the biggest cities in Pakistan. Long shot. Didn't expect anything of it. Went out, had some drinks with some buddies of mine that had made. And lo and behold, in an hour, I got someone said, hey, I actually know a guy who's head of Chamber of Commerce in Lahore, and he can get you a visa invite if you are willing to do a speech for their chamber. And I was like, well, I've given loads of speeches. That's perfect. And before I knew it, I had like visa authorization letters from me and two friends who I'd met. And I was like, guys, you're coming too. And yeah, we flew via Sri Lanka. And I remember like going to the market to buy business looking clothes. Because like if I'm going in on a business visa, I gotta look businessy. This is the mindset and how young I was at the time. And so like we land into Lahore Airport, you know, with the most creased up backpacked clothes you could find. And the immigration guard pulls us in. And it's not that we were getting a hard time, but he was like, you must have tea, you know, please sit. You want some food? And he brings out some biryani and he's like chatting away with us. And he's like, what football team do you support? And we're like, we were super nervous. And all of a sudden we're like just shooting the breeze with like the head of immigration, having some food, having some tea, you know? And like he put the stamps inside our passport. And he was just, for the next half an hour, we just kept shooting the breeze, having a great time. And he's like, look, if you need anything while you're here, please take my personal number. So what? He's like, please take my
Wow.
personal number. And if you get stuck for anything while you're here in Pakistan, you'll be my humble, honored guest. Me and the lads just looked at each other. We were like, is this for real or is this some sort of scam? This can't be real. The guy walks us out, helps us with our bags, brings us out to the front of the airport, and waits with us until our driver arrives. This Chamber of Commerce had arranged a driver. We're feeling very imposter syndrome. Like there's a big fancy black car with a driver coming to collect us, everything else. You know, the head of immigration is pretty much handing us over, you know. And I realized that like I completely misunderstood what this country was all about. I completely got this wrong. And so over the course of the next 5 days, I was meeting like some of the most influential business people in Pakistan who had the licenses for Coca-Cola, Nestle, all of these manufacturing plants that made all the shoes for brands that we all know and love. And so, yeah, I was just kind of like, how in the hell did I get such a backstage seat to life in this country? I'm, you know, giving tours in these manufacturing plants in these factories, giving speeches to employees with a translator, talking to Chamber of Commerce, and meeting some of the most fascinating people. But at this point, I realized maybe I have fallen into the trap of I am with the 1% here. I am with the enamored financial elite of this country. I need to step outside of my comfort zone again. So I got a sign. I got a guy to write in Urdu, which is in the Arabic script, Islamabad. And I went out, stood at the side of the road and started hitchhiking towards the nation's capital. And the people who were hosting us were so confused. They're like, why would you want to get a bus? We can arrange a private car. We can arrange everything for you. I was like, nah, I'm good. And they're like, well, even a public bus, we'll get. I was like, no, I'm going to hitchhike. And so, but in Pakistan, hitchhiking really isn't a huge thing. And so sticking out your thumb at the side of the road, you get surrounded by a couple of hundred people looking to see, do you have Facebook, taking selfies? They're just like, what the fuck are you doing here? But lo and behold, we found one of these guys in like these big, colorful Pakistani logistics trucks. They've got bells and paintings all over them, flashing lights and loads of these plastic kind of fondles hanging off it. It's a very big thing in Pakistan if you have a truck that you paint it. So it looks a bit like, I don't know, like a piece of traveling art. It's the most bizarre thing. This guy pulled over and was like, "You guys okay?" And we were like, "Yeah, we're trying to get to this land." He's like, "I'm going there now. Jump in." So we're like in like the truckers, the sort of, what do you call it? The truckers carriage. Me, the two lads, and this guy, smoking cigarette, and he's smoking hash because everyone in Pakistan just smokes hash normally. And we're just yammering away, and he's like, "Yeah, so what brings you here, and where are you going?" And he's like, "You know what? If you want, you can stay at my house tonight." And we were like, we just need a hotel where we are left alone for one night, but thank you so much. But then we met like just a sequence of interesting characters that were like ruby and emerald dealers who like they did mining in the north and would export to the rest of the world. We met anti-Taliban vigilante fighters who self-mobilize, self-militarize, and train in case any kind of sort of Taliban insurrection in the north would happen. Brought us target practice. Met a guy who like was more educated in Irish literary greats than I would, and after studying it in school. And he was a grandson of like a very famous poet in Pakistan, with a large bronze statue of his grandfather in the city, and he had like a homosexual love affair with an Afghan warlord. Just I was like, this is like a cartoon. This country is bonkers. And then I found the mountains. And I was trekking in the mountains for weeks, staying in local homestays with farmers, helping them pick apricots off trees, and just having a real slow time. Time was literally at zero. I didn't know how long I was there. It was just day after day, hanging out with these amazing friends, just like drinking like illegal moonshine made from the water, because it's illegal in Pakistan to drink. But everything's illegal, but everything's possible. And I was just like, you know what? I'm bringing people back here. I'm doing it. I'm coming back here again. I'm going to show the world that like we got it wrong. This is like the most underrated travel backpacking gem. And I did. About a year later, I convinced a group of people to come with me, put together sort of a tour. I would say the quality of that tour was abysmal, but they were team players, and we made it work. But now we have one of the biggest tour companies in Pakistan. And we're doing something like 22 tours this year, bringing people from
Wow.
literally every corner of the world. I don't know how many countries we brought people from, but yeah, it's impressive. And we work with a lot of the biggest travel influencers who then bring their audience, and they're incentivized to do it. So there's like this ripple effect that's happened. And back when I was first going, there was suicide bombings happening in Karachi and Lahore on a regular basis. It wasn't safe, but they've done a great job. They really won the war on terrorism internally. Um, Up until, well, recently, there's been a few incidents, but they've done a really, really good job of making it really safe. And that meant that more influencers and YouTubers wanted to come. And now I've got a network of YouTubers and TikTokers, a big Instagram influencers who are bringing people from all over the world. And any of those kind of viral videos you see now that are going out there is because more influencers have seen the big influencers coming, and they want a slice of the virality, because when people see the content, they're like, that's Pakistan? No
Yeah.
way. And so that's sort of been like the story where it became a bit of a business success. So my best friends are from Pakistan. I've got business partners in Pakistan. Over the years, I've started selling rubies and emeralds from these mines also ethically. And also supporting some of the communities there and helping them build out touristic infrastructure, developing out like guest houses, and the places where we were staying 6 years ago are now bigger rooms, better
Mhm.
infrastructure. They've got backup generators. They've got internet. So yeah, it's been such a transformation for them, and it was great to kind of get there when it was at an all-time low. I'm glad to be one of the first that got in there.
That's got to be amazing for you to see what it was when you first went to what's going on there now. And I'm guessing the people are the same great people, it sounds like.
For sure, money corrupts. We know that. So, for example, there's this one beautiful lake in the north called Atabad Lake. It's not actually a real lake; it's man-made. It's like a town that was there. There was a there was a landslide that happened. I think it was a man-made landslide, and it made this big lake called Atabad Lake. Cerulean blue, stunning, surrounded by almost vertical mountains. It's bizarre to get a boat ride on. But when I was there, there was not even a tea stand or a tent around it. Now there's jet skis, 40 boats, you can get pizza. And that's not something that you can even get really in Pakistan that much. And it's, there's a coffee shop and like there's gem stores and souvenir stores. That's only been it's only 8 years now in terms of going from zero to tourism boom.
Big time tourist.
But it's mostly the domestic tourism. So no one in Pakistan was interested in going to the Northern Territories. But international YouTubers making it look so great have built up this. It's almost like Westerners bringing yoga back to India. It's Westerners bringing the touristic beauty of the North back to Pakistan. So it's been an interesting one. So definitely I've seen more over time, like there's more of a passion to make money out of foreigners because they now all learn that, like, hey, this guy's making a lot of money too. But they've done pretty well with it for the most part. They're still very hospitable and very welcoming. And I would say Pakistan, it's not one country. People think it is, but the region in the north is autonomous. It's principalities. They're very different. They look almost like Tajik, like Russian settlers, blue eyes, ginger hair, blonde hair sometimes. Whereas Sindh, Balochistan, Punjab, these are all provinces that during the Great Divide caused by the British, and in Ireland we know all about divides caused by the British. They just chopped up certain territories that were still quite tribal and just, right, you're Muslim, you go in there. But there's so many languages, there's so many different cultures and castes and traditions that, in one corner aren't even aware of the other corner. It's such a beautiful place. You could travel it forever and still see 10% of it. So yeah,
Wow. One thing that you did there that I found was very interesting, you took a rickshaw across the entire country. Can you tell a little bit about that experience and what that was like, and explain what a rickshaw is in case people don't know? But it's those little carts, right? Those little like motorcycle cart deals.
Yeah, it's kind of like a tricycle a bit with a lawnmower engine stuck onto it. It's probably one of the stupidest things I've done because there was no need to do it. I just kind of wanted to do it. I was like, oh, it's a long country, it's I don't know what it is, it's like 1,600 miles or something like that. And but it's like 1,600 miles in Pakistan is like 10,000 miles of a normal road, because road is an extension of what it actually is. It's a lot of it's dirt track. Sometimes we drove through actual rivers in these tricycles. But it's definitely one of the stupidest things I've done. Not the stupidest for sure, but definitely one of the stupidest things I've done because it was just so hard. It was like 48 to 49 degrees centigrade. I think one day it was 51 in the Sindh desert. And these things we were driving, they're usually like for getting around cities. They're nifty, they're small, like 120 cc's, it's like your chainsaw is probably more powerful. And I just landed in. I went to this part of Karachi, which is like a city of 22 million people. It's like, I don't know. It's like if you were to imagine overpopulation in the future, except it's now and it's like it's roasting. And I found this street where they just sell rickshaws on that street. And I went around, and I have no idea what's a good rickshaw or a bad rickshaw. I don't even know how to fix one. I didn't even have to drive one. But I went around from shop to shop, and I was like, I also didn't have a license, didn't have any permissions, paperwork. I'm a tourist, So I pop into a shop, and I'm like, how much is a rickshaw? He's giving me a price. And after getting an average of about 20 prices, none of them matched up. I was like, you know what? I just like this guy. He gave me tea, and he gave me some curry, so I'm gonna go with this guy. So I started it up. I was like, cool, that sounds good. And I was like, do you have another one? He's like, yeah, that one too. So I paid him for two. Didn't even try out the second one. So now I've got two rickshaws because I got a guy coming with me who wanted to make like a sort of a documentary on it. Because I was telling him about it, having a drink one day, and he was like, "Can I just come and just video this? Because this is hilarious, So he came along as well, and I got another guy as well from Pakistan who also wanted to join in. So he came along as well. Between us, we bought these rickshaws, and then we were like, all right, now we got to drive them. And we all looked at each other and we were like, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to, it's got gears and shit. It's kind of like a motorbike, but it's different. It's got levers and pulleys and sorts of things, I was like, okay, well, let's pay the guy in the shop to bring us to the kind of the government office where we'll get some paperwork. So there's no license plates, nothing on these things. So he drives us to his metropolitan office. We go, and it's the usual thing in Pakistan where they're like, oh, it's like going to take 4 weeks to process this. And I was like, look, what would it take to get it done tomorrow? And they were like, ooh, well, do you want all the license plates? Do you want this? Do you want that? And I was like, just give me what I need to get on the road, and I'll pay you now 75%. I'll pay the rest tomorrow. He's like, all right, sounds good. So we turned 1 month of bureaucracy into 24 hours. Next challenge was, now that we actually had vehicles that were road legal, and we had to buy them through another proxy because I'm not allowed to own a vehicle in Pakistan, we'd found like this dirt road in the middle of the city, like cables hanging everywhere, rocks all over the place, holes in the ground. And we're like, all right, let's just like keep going up and down this road until we figure out how to drive this thing. So we're like chugging and starting and like breaking stuff and like, okay, we think we got it. And the roads in Karachi, they don't have lanes. So it's might is right. If it's bigger than you give it right away. So if it's a giant lorry, great. If it's a motorbike, you're probably on par. If it's a donkey and cart with 1,000 bags of grain on it, okay, you could probably overtake it. It's not going to move too fast and make unpredictable moves. So we set off the first morning, like super early, because we knew we had a long way to go to a place called Hyderabad. And I'd say we were like 10 minutes down the road and the clutch broke. I'm like, fuck. Another rickshaw driver who was doing early taxi rounds sees us, immediately comes to our rescue and sort of like uses his foot and drives, pushing us with his foot to a mechanic's garage that we had to wait for 2 hours for the mechanic to get out of bed. And then another hour for him to find a part in a shop, 10 miles away. We eventually get this thing fixed. It took us like 5 hours and we were only about a 10-minute walk from where we left. We were like, fuck, this is ridiculous, And this became the story where we would break down or break something 5 times a day. So we bought these secondhand things. We didn't know what a good vehicle was to look for. But after about a week, we pretty much had a brand new machine because we'd replaced everything as we broke it.
Funny.
But everywhere we went, we like stayed with nice locals, met a lot of cool people. We met a guy who brought us into his mangrove farm. Another guy who brought us out shooting naked. We stayed in another place where he's kind of like descendants of royalty that was there from before the British time, and they still have the palace and everything else in the family. So brought us on a tour of this like private palace museum. Just really, really, really cool stuff. And so we had this sort of thing where we were breaking down 10 times a day, fixing bits. And if you look at like the video when it comes out, it's still not fully finished. We had next month. You'll see that 90% of the journey was us breaking down. And if people ask, why the hell did you get like these secondhand crappy vehicles? And the reason was we sort of wanted to stop randomly because wherever we would overheat, break a valve, destroy the brakes, get a puncture, someone would come, be like, what are you guys doing here? And we'd meet so we'd no choice over who we met. It was all random, And some of these guys were like towing us in trucks and like hauling out batteries and like amazingly helpful. If this was done anywhere else in the world, I'm pretty sure they would have just been like, oh, someone had a breakdown. Anyway,
See
but
ya.
no one would leave you alone. And so it was amazing. We got to stay with so many people, great hospitality in the mountains then. We had a real challenge for a few days because there was no garages for like a full 18 hours drive. So we had like plastic water bottles filled with just gasoline, all strapped in a plastic bag, hanging off the side of the rickshaw.
Wow.
And every now and again we top it up, and like if you break down there, really there is no one. This is like
You're
the most
toast.
You're driving for hours, seeing nothing but road and rocks and the odd electrical cable. So there was a few hairy moments. There was moments where like we broke down in places where like you shouldn't be. It's actually not safe. We got stuck in a desert storm. What else happened? Like we got stuck in a few blizzards as well, because when we got up to high altitude, we were going to a place called the Kunjara Pass. It's covered in snow, stuck in blizzards, like skidding in snow. So we went from like the desert all the way to like the snow. So we saw every landscape over the course of like 16 days, driving every day for like 16 hours nonstop. Your hands were vibrating for days afterwards. It was a pretty sick experience. Climbing like this really high altitude mountain, like you could walk faster because these vehicles are just so shitty, like trundling along. And also in low oxygen as well, because you're up there around about 4,000 meters, like it's really low oxygen. These things are like, you're giving me nothing to work with here. Well, we finally actually made it. And then we gave the tuk-tuks away as a gift to a family that they've got lovely kids, and one of their oldest son actually works as a guide for me. We gave them a gift of these rickshaws, which were now in pretty good nick, all brand new parts. But it was cool
Wow.
to go through, that kind of experience. And it's stuff like that where every day you're like, why am I doing this? This is pointless. This is hard work. I don't like this. It's getting over that every day that makes you tough.
No doubt. That's impressive. And it's awesome that you're able to do that. Speaking of that, what are some of the, as you do this and you run these companies and you're all over the place, what are some of the challenges you face? What does Will face that are some of your challenges?
Probably holding down a relationship. A rolling stone gathers no moss. And it's difficult unless you have someone who follows the same lifestyle as you
Hmm.
or is able to, I guess, follow your plan. If I've got a tour coming up now on the 5th of September, it's quite a unique tour. It's our first inaugural tour to Afghanistan. So we're
Wow.
bringing a group of people into Kabul, and over the course of like 8, 9 days, we're going to bring them from Kabul to Kandahar. Now, most girls you date don't want to come on those kind of work trips, understandably so. And then only 2 weeks later, I've got another trip I'm doing in Pakistan. So it's hard to be living in New York, traveling around the US, building some business. You're in Australia for 2 weeks, and then you're in Pakistan for a while. So in Mexico for a month as well this year, doing 2 tours. It's very, very, very hard to maintain a relationship that's a bit long distance. People tend to get like worried or jealous or insecure, whatever it is. So maintaining a relationship is probably the hardest part. The business part, it's fun,
Yeah.
entrepreneurship, is fun. It's if you look at any trust fund kid who has loads of money, they don't care. It's it's the person who earns the money, who gets it, who wins it. That's what it is. It's not like the pursuit of happiness, it's the happiness of the pursuit of getting the money. And so entrepreneurship and making money and building business is fun. And if it fails, who cares? I tried and it was interesting to learn. And hopefully I created some unique experience for people along the way. But ultimately, the entrepreneurship bit, that's the easy part. Making sure that your health's good, that you're staying in
Right.
touch with your family, that you're nurturing happy relationships. Because when you're older, and you're 60, 70 and your health's not as good as it used to be, yeah, the money will help a bit, but ultimately, studies show that people who are the happiest the longest are those who have happy relationships around them. So, people like you, Jake, who've got 4 kids, you're gonna have
Yeah,
your hands full now, but in the future, you're gonna have a bunch of buddies around you that are bonded to you for life, and that's awesome.
absolutely. You're totally right about that. What would you say to somebody who's maybe thinking about like kind of interested in maybe some of these tours? Because like, maybe I want to get out of my comfort zone a little bit and go on a tour in Pakistan or Afghanistan. What would you say to someone who's kind of on the edge of that, not really sure if they should do it? What kind of advice would you give them?
There's two sides to this to understand the answer. I would have always been someone who said, "Don't go on a group tour. It's a sheltered experience, and you're not going to have meaningful interactions with the locals." And the only way to do, say, North Korea is by doing an organized tour, and there was no other way for me to see it apart from that. And that was exactly the experience I had. I went on it, I did it, and I was like, no meaningful interactions with
Mm-hmm.
locals. But fast forward a little bit later, and I realized maybe I could do this, but I could create a experience for people in a group environment that still allows them to be a bit uncomfortable. So rather than serving them every little thing up on a plate, more like, here's a rope bridge with some rickety logs. Let's go. So you're still being pushed outside your comfort zone. I know it's safe because I've done these things. Like in Pakistan, we do things like crossing one of the longest low hanging rope bridges in the world. We drive 4x4s along what is known as, or was known as, the world's most deadly road. It's like a cliff road. It's a real white knuckle experience. And so we're still getting people to get that adrenaline rush, step outside their comfort zone. We're staying with the locals. There's no big hotels or chains. It's small to medium sized businesses. It's families. It's like, freelancers. And it means that the people are like, it feels kind of like I'm backpacking, but you've done all the logistical stuff behind. So I really don't need to think about where I'm going or what I'm doing. But what I'm doing is stuff that I would never do myself also. So we sort of like made these tours in a way that even the recent tour in Mexico, we got people diving and got them up on horses and gone horse riding through the mountains and went diving in cenotes and all sorts of stuff. So it's like you can opt out of all these things. You can sit back and watch everyone do it. But we create a safe space for you to try stuff you'd never try in countries you'd never want to go to initially, until you come across us and then you're like, that looks kind of fun.
I like that because you're giving a mix kind of, because there's some people who need to have someone kind of help them plan the things and do the things, but still want to kind of get out of their comfort zone. So I like how you're kind of, you provide that mix, which I think is really good. So if someone wants to do this, how do they find you? What do they do if they want to get involved and go on one of your tours?
Yeah, I mean, you can go on to readyforroad.com, but website's under maintenance, so it'll look like we just do Pakistan. Or you can also just follow me directly on Instagram. I'm kind of doing a lot of on a personal level. It's a real passion of mine. So that's Will Meara, Meara .loco. If you just type in William Meara on Instagram on Google, you'll find it pretty quick. But the key behind, I think, the success and what we're doing, we're organizing tours in countries where it's hard to do it yourself. There's no touristic infrastructure, hop on, hop off bus. You gotta really grind it out, figure it out, and trust in local advice. And a lot of people who are like, they've looked at our tours, they click on it, look around, like, okay, and that's the price, no worries. And then I follow up with them like, oh no, I think I'm gonna go on my own. I'm like, no worries, if you ever change your mind, you let me know. And then about a month or two later, they come back and they're like, oh, there's a bit to this, isn't there? I'm like, yeah, there is. It's taken us years to craft this down to perfection where we understand how to do it. So we really take the pain out of it, that you still get the best bits from it, more or less.
Wow. Very good. Do you have a place now? It sounds like you're going to Afghanistan here shortly. Is there any other place that's on your radar? Like, hey, this is a place that's hard to get to. It's a place that a lot of people don't want to go to, but I want to go there. Do you have some place that you haven't been yet that you want to go to?
Yeah, I do actually. Algeria.
Algeria. Okay.
Yeah, it's somewhere that like you'd walk right past it if you didn't know. It's about previous French colony, pretty close to Europe, mostly desert, but very hospitable, super interesting culturally, a wild history. And they've got like they all kind of cling to the coastline, a bit like Australians. That's where the oasis belt is in terms of like the nomadic culture, in terms of like even the urban culture, the food, the way they live life. Um, I've been so keen to visit it for years, and only now recently have they made it that you don't need to go to the embassy in London if you're living in Ireland to get the visa. So that's top of my list because it's also really close. It's just over the other side of the
Yeah.
Mediterranean. Um, whereas for a long time it was Mongolia, but Mongolia is far away and it's very remote. But there's a mission I'm planning, and it's to go by horseback, two horses, one for supplies and one for me, and go from the entire eastern point of Mongolia, shaped kind of like an eye,
Mm-hmm.
all the way to the western point of Mongolia. Um, there's one guy who did it pulling a cart, like the supplies
Wow.
cart. It wasn't the entire width of Mongolia, but it was a good stretch of it. And I've been fascinated to try kind of tie in visiting some of these nomadic moving tribes along the country and just park up, stay with them for a while, refuel my horse, and then do it again. So that's a few years down the way. I've got a few things to do in the meantime, but that's a personal expedition that I'll do at some
Very
stage.
cool. And Mongolia is big. That's not a small country.
It's
That's
massive.
big.
It is.
That is
Massive.
big.
It is huge.
Wow.
Yeah, people underestimate the size of it because it's right beside China, and China makes everything
Right.
else be smaller.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, that's
But
impressive. This has been awesome. I mean, I'm super impressed with what you're doing, who you are, and the explorations you're on, the adventures you're on. Any last minute parting thoughts you have for us before we wrap it up?
yeah, no one has ever regretted booking that trip. So if there's a trip in your mind, you'll never regret it. What you will regret is wasting time working for someone who really, if you leave tomorrow, they don't care about
You
you
know?
anymore. You're just there to make money for them, and they're paying you percentage of that back in a wage. So if you have some money, quit your job, go travel for a while. It'll be probably the best thing you'll ever do for yourself, for your mind, and you'll never forget it. But you definitely won't remember the days you're working right now.
Excellent. Will, thank you so much for coming on Journey with Jake.
Pleasure. Great to talk to you, man.
A special thanks to Will Meara for coming on the show today. That was a lot of fun, and I loved hearing his stories and passion for adventure. Be sure and follow Will on Instagram at willmeara.loco. That's WILLMEARA.loco, LOCO. Or check out his website, readyforroad.com. Wow. I love doing this. Thanks to each and every one of you for listening to the show each and every week. Please tell your family and friends about the show. And if you or someone you know has an adventure you want to share on the show, let's talk about it. Send me an email to jake@journeywithjake.net or direct message me on Instagram at Journey with Jake Podcast. Next week on Journey with Jake, we have Chris Cameron on the show. Chris is known as a high-flying outdoorsman. We will swim with sharks and fly for the Sheriff's Department on next week's show. Another fantastic adventure next week on Journey with Jake. Just remember, it's not always about the destination as it is about the journey. Take care, everybody.